Hello and welcome to News 20 at 5. I'm Brea Hollingsworth.
And I'm Giselle Thomas. Thanks for joining us. Now we have the biggest story of the day out of New York City.
8 people were killed and 13 people were injured. New Yorkers undergo yet another terrorist attack shortly after 3 p.m. yesterday. And Halloween festivities were put on hold. A rented Home Depot truck plowed through a bicycle path. Police identified the driver as being 29-year-old Saifullah Saipov. And again, it happened yesterday in Manhattan when the suspect drove a rented truck through a bike path. Kristen Holmes is in New York with the very latest.
This was an act of terror, and a particularly cowardly act of terror aimed at innocent civilians.
It was just after 3 p.m. Tuesday when Saifullah Saipov, a 29-year-old Uzbek national, drove a rented truck into a crowd of bicyclists and pedestrians near the World Trade Center.
It happened out of nowhere. I was walking down the street, it was a normal day, and just out of nowhere I see people running and screaming.
Witnesses also report the suspect shouted Allahu Akbar, and a law enforcement official says there was a note in the truck claiming the attack was done in the name of ISIS.
He was associated with ISIS, and he was radicalized domestically, and he's a depraved coward.
Saipov was shot and captured by NYPD officer Ryan Nash.
After the collision, the driver of the truck, a 29-year-old male, exited the vehicle brandishing 2 handguns. A uniformed police officer assigned to the 1st Precinct confronted the subject and shot him in the abdomen. The subject was wounded and transported to a local hospital.
The focus now, the investigation into what happened and why.
That work's going to be done by the FBI, by the NYPD, and all of our partners to determine exactly who this man is, what moved him to this horrible act.
In Lower Manhattan, I'm Kristen Holmes.
The FBI, NYPD, and other members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force are now investigating the attack.
And now our own Stanley Danzy joins us live with news regarding the upcoming state legislative session about school and environmental funding.
Thank you, Giselle. Leon County voters are preparing for the 2018 state upcoming legislative session. Residents in Tallahassee want more funds for schools and the environment. The money is planned to go to restrictions on guns and a ban on fracking for oil and gas. At delegation meetings, a third of the speakers urged lawmakers to spend more on public education, foster care, and health care. And some want more money for the environmental protection. That's all the news I have for you. Back to you all at the desk.
The First Amendment Foundation asked for a formal investigation on whether city officials broke the state's public record laws. A Tallahassee Democrat reporter requested text messages from City Manager Rick Fernandez dating from September 26th to September 30th of 2016. The city's public records officer replied to the reporter there was no information found. The text messages sent by or received from government officials are considered public records. New legislation about concealed weapons on college and university campuses take effect next year. We wanted to find out exactly what this means for schools. It's illegal for anyone with or without a permit to carry a concealed weapon on college and university campuses. New legislation passed. It allows concealed carrying on campuses. Chief Operating Officer of Talon Range, J.D. Johnson, says violence is violence no matter what weapon is used.
A lot of countries in Europe that don't have guns. Okay, so the bad guys use a knife or a truck or a baseball bat or whatever. If somebody wants to do violence, you can't stop somebody that wants to do violence.
He believes guns aren't always bad.
The only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
The legislature may agree. It tried to grant people the option to carry concealed weapons on campus. One Tallahassee city official says guns on campus is an issue.
We don't want the legislature to open up more access to guns on campus. I support people's right to go hunting and carry weapons if they need to, but our campus are a unique space, and I think it is really important to limit access within the classroom on campus in that type of space.
In 2015, presidents from local colleges and universities agreed to approve a resolution opposing concealed weapons. The National Rifle Association calls this position the safety circle. Now, Florida has a reciprocity agreement allowing licensed concealed carry holders to carry their guns across 37 states. The new legislation takes effect in 2018. Now, the laws may have changed regarding concealed weapons, but procedure to obtain a license and permit remains the same.
On Tuesday, the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce unanimously voted to conduct an independent study on consolidating Tallahassee and Leon County governments. The topic of consolidation had been brought up in the past, but voters originally rejected the idea. Now that local law enforcement is trying to get a handle on crime in Tallahassee, the chamber officials are reconsidering it. The results are expected to be released to the public in mid-January.
City Manager Rick Fernandez decided to take a voluntary paid administrative leave of absence on Monday after a state ethics investigation into his acceptance of FSU football tickets from a lobbyist. According to the Tallahassee Democrat, City Commissioner Gil Ziffer sent Fernandez an email stating that he was suspended until the outcome of the investigation. Deputy City Manager Reese Gold will step in the meeting to discuss the matter that is set for next Wednesday.
Coming up on News 20 at 5, we have the latest in sports and weather.
Plus, Obamacare isn't out of the way. We have details on how you can be covered. Stay tuned. You're watching News 20 at 5. Welcome back to News 20 at 5. I'm Giselle Thomas.
And I'm Brea Hollingsworth, and now we have news from around the world. 2 former Trump campaign officials turned themselves into federal authorities Monday morning. The first arrest made in special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. Meanwhile, a former campaign advisor pleads guilty to lying to officials. Karen Kaifa has the latest developments on the story.
The White House on Monday distancing themselves from the indictments of former Trump campaign officials Paul Manafort and Rick Gates.
Today's announcement has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the president's campaign or campaign activity.
Manafort and Gates pleaded not guilty in federal district court in Washington Monday afternoon after surrendering to federal authorities earlier in the day.
I think you all saw today that President Donald Trump was correct. There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government.
These initial charges do not cover any activities related to the 2016 campaign, but it's possible additional charges could come later. The indictment against Manafort and Gates contains 12 counts, including conspiracy against the United States, conspiracy to launder money, unregistered agent of a foreign principal, false and misleading U.S. Foreign Agents Registration Act statements, false statements, and 7 counts of failure to file reports of foreign bank and financial accounts. Additionally, newly unsealed records today show that George Papadopoulos, a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, has pleaded guilty for making false statements to the FBI. Trump's attorney, Jay Sekulow, said the president will not interfere as Mueller continues his work.
The president is not interfering with Special Counsel Mueller's position. He's not firing the special counsel. He said that before. I'm not concerned about where this goes. Obviously, I think one thing this does establish is special counsel's moving expeditiously, and that's, I think, good for the country and good for the president.
In Washington, I'm Karen Kaifa.
The deadly terror attack in New York has President Trump voicing support for a so-called merit-based immigration system. Authorities say the suspect in Tuesday's terror attack is a native of Uzbekistan. Trump expressed support in August for legislation that could replace current employment-based visas with a point system. The plan would award points to potential immigrants based on broad categories such as age, English proficiency, and salary.
Welcome back. I'm Sade Kelly here with your weather updates. Let's take a look at some of today's temperatures. Now today we're starting off with 77 degrees. Our humidity is going to be at 40%. Our winds are moving south at 6 miles per hour and our rain is going to be at 0%. Moving on into tonight's temperatures, we're going to be pretty low. Degrees at 54. Winds are moving 7 miles per hour. Our humidity is going to be at 90% and our sunset will be at 6:49 p.m. with rain at 10%. Now we're going to have a look at our area temperatures. Albany is going to be at a high of 79 and a low of 54. Bainbridge at a high of 80 and a low of 56. Crawfordville at a high of 77 and a low of 54. Marianna at a high of 80 and a low of 57. Moultrie is going to be at a high of 76 and a low of 54. Thomasville at a high of 77 and a low of 53. And Quincy is going to be at a high of 78 and a low of 54. Now for a look at our 5-day forecast. Starting off with today, once again, it's going to be pretty sunny outside. We have a high of 77 and 54 degrees. For Thursday, tomorrow, we're looking at a high of 81 degrees and a low of 55. Starting off our weekend with Friday, it's going to be a high of 83 degrees and a low of 57. On Saturday, it's going to be mostly sunny with a high of 84 degrees and a low of 57 as well. And on Sunday, we're going to have a high of 85 degrees and a low of 58. So we're starting to get into those cooler temperatures once again. Now we have Jessica Ward with sports.
Welcome back. I'm Jessica Ward with your sports. FAMU Athletic Director Milton Overton has left his position with the Rattlers Athletics Department to take the same position at Kennesaw State University. According to KSU, Overton will begin the KSU on December 1st. Former Rattler football player John Eason will take over as the interim AD. When Eason begins as interim athletic director, he will be the 8th AD for the program since 2010. FAMU plays Howard on Saturday.
Have a good night.